Hi, I'm Florence. My mentor this summer is Dr. Susan Ayas, and I'm very grateful for her support during my entire research process. For this project, I created an emotion classification model and applied it to images of distracted drivers. My objective was to establish a relationship between driver emotions and distracted behavior, with the eventual aim of contributing to an emotion-based driver monitoring system. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, distracted driving claimed more than 3,000 lives in the US in 2023 alone. There are many causes for distraction, and one important but sometimes overlooked factor is emotion. Indeed, studies have consistently shown a link between drivers' performance and emotions, including anger, happiness, and fear. This is especially significant considering the amount of emotional content on the road, a number that has been increasing. Apart from traditional distractions such as billboards and phones, in-vehicle information systems have been increasingly integrated into cars. They provide drivers with entertainment, visual interfaces, music, and more, all of which are charged with emotions and hog drivers' attention. It seems inevitable that emotions are, and will continue to be, an important measure and predictor of how distracted drivers are. To spot and warn distracted drivers, driver monitoring systems, or DMS, have been put forward as a technological solution. A driver monitoring system uses cameras and sensors within the vehicle to monitor drivers' behavior and attentiveness in real time. It alerts drivers to risky behaviors, such as distracted driving, improving road safety, and governments have been taking notice. Recent years have seen a global push for the mandatory inclusion of DMS in motor vehicles. In particular, the European Commission mandates all new vehicles to be equipped with driver distraction warning systems by 2026. In the context of these new regulations, there has been considerable research dedicated to the creation of an effective DMS. Researchers have used a variety of metrics to measure driver attention, including vehicle speed, gaze direction, physiological signals, and self-reported driving performance. To the best of our knowledge, however, there has been no study of the direct correlation between emotion and distraction, so this was a topic I chose to pursue. My research process can be roughly divided into two stages. The first pertains to profile emotion classification and training a viable model. The second stage consists of applying this model to images of distracted drivers and gauging the relationship between emotion and distraction. Finally, we will discuss the limitations of this study and possible next steps. So let's move on to emotion classification. The dataset I used was the Karolinska Directed Emotional Faces dataset, which gives multiple angles for each subject. For the purposes of this study, I decided to focus on side views. Few emotion studies have concentrated on profile faces, but profile views are more feasibly filmed by in-vehicle cameras, making them a practical choice for a driver monitoring system. First, I pre-processed images, filtering out blank images and standardizing orientation. I then used the MediaPipe face landmarker to extract face landmarks from images. Facial landmarks are points of interest on the face, so they define feature points such as the left eye, right eye, and nose base. The landmarker returns the X and Y coordinates of all the landmarks, which was successfully performed on almost all of our images. Next, I computed relevant distances between landmark pairs. This was done since facial geometry can provide important clues for facial expressions. Studies have shown that regardless of our ethnic and cultural backgrounds, our facial expressions are remarkably similar. Therefore, when we express happiness, sadness, or anger, our facial muscles contort in more or less similar ways. Our brows may lift, increasing the distance between brow and eyelid. Our eyes may narrow, reducing eye height, and so on. To compute these distances, X and Y coordinates of each landmark pair were simply subtracted. Since different faces have different anatomy, these distances were normalized in regard to face width and height. To improve classification accuracy, I also included distances from landmarks to a central point of reference. To train and evaluate an emotion model, I split the dataset into training and validation sets. I elected to use a random forest model and a multi-layer perceptron, or an MLP. Random forests have been shown to be lightweight and effective in low-power classification applications, making them ideal for driver monitoring systems. Neural networks, on the other hand, have gained significant attention for excellent performance on emotion extraction tasks. The results after training are as shown. The random forest achieved 81.6% accuracy, while the MLP achieved 81.8% accuracy. Now, considering the large number of landmarks we used, the inputs for our models had high dimensional complexity. While this did not reduce emotion accuracy for our present dataset, it may do so for actual driver datasets. In anticipation of this problem, I applied dimensional reduction to input data, reducing the number of inputs from 146 to 30. Emotion classification results after dimension reduction can be seen in the slide. While the random forest shows a slight reduction in accuracy, the MLP shows a slight improvement. With these results, it appears that landmark distances are indeed good indicators of emotion, even for profile faces. In the second stage of my research, I turned to the task of establishing a relationship between driver emotion and the specific type of distraction they're engaging in. For this purpose, I used the State Farm distracted driver dataset, which includes images of drivers engaged in a variety of distracting behaviors. Specific classes can be seen in the table here. As before, I pre-processed driver images and used the face landmarker to extract landmark positions. But the process is a little more complicated for the distracted driver dataset, since faces have much lower quality than in the emotion dataset. To help the face landmarker detect faces, I used an object detector to find a bounding box of each driver and then crop accordingly. Cropping images significantly improved face detection accuracy. I was then able to use the face landmarker to successfully extract landmark positions for over 10,000 images, roughly half of the entire dataset. With landmark positions in hand, the next step was to compute intra-landmark distances needed for the emotion classification model. For the distracted driver dataset, however, this is a bit of a problem. As you can see from these comparison images, faces from the Karolinska directed emotional faces dataset are perfectly poised and lighted, while faces from the distracted driver's dataset are photographed from an angle. To solve the rotation problem, I applied trigonometric transformations to obtain target distances, which are shown in yellow in the reference image. At this stage, all the necessary materials for emotion classification were complete and ready, so I fed them into the random forest and MLP models. Now, for each image, I had an emotion label and a distraction label, so studying the correlation between the two becomes a problem of aggregation and grouping. The emotion distribution for distraction classes can be seen in this slide. While testing the different models, I found that emotion classification models with dimensional reduction performed significantly better on the driver dataset. Both models still demonstrated skews in their outputs, but with enough variability in results to suggest a tentative correlation between driver emotion and distraction. I also compiled emotion rankings for each distraction class. It's notable that emotion variability is the highest for class 9, in which drivers are talking to passengers. This might seem intuitive given the effect of socializing on positive expressions, but it's also significant that most images in this category display frontal views of drivers, thus producing more accurate results for emotion detection. Since data from the driver dataset had to be transformed and adapted simply to classify emotions, there were very likely inaccuracies in emotion labeling. Due to this reason, I also completed a comparison study that omits the step of emotion evaluation. This step was performed with the aim of understanding if a direct relationship exists between landmark distances and distraction types. For this experiment, only a multilayer perceptron was used. The model yielded 61.6% accuracy on the distracted driver's dataset, indicating a moderate correlation between landmark geometry and different types of distraction. The confusion matrix for distraction labels can be seen in the slide. Overall, emotion on its own seems to have limited predictive power for driver distraction. This can be explained by a variety of factors, the first being flaws in our emotion extraction process, complicated by the low quality of faces in the distracted driver's dataset. A second contributing factor might be diminished emotional intensity in profile faces, which aligns with findings from various studies on emotion. Thirdly, due to the Hawthorne effect, the driver's consciousness of being filmed may have diminished the spontaneity of their expressions. Finally, a more nuanced measure of affective traits might be more valuable for distraction detection, something that's evidently lacking in simple emotion labels. To conclude results and findings in this study, an emotion classification model was shown to be feasible for profile faces, achieving 83.4% accuracy. When applied to the driver distraction dataset, the model revealed some patterns in emotion classification, but with considerable ambiguity and low predictive potential. This indicates a possible lack of connection between emotion labels and distraction categories, while also revealing problems in model adaptation. Despite this, a moderate correlation was established between landmark distances and distraction types, indicating the potential for more nuanced analysis of facial features to succeed in establishing a relationship with distraction. Further research can focus on refining emotion classification to account for distortion, rotation, and low resolution. We can also investigate more subtle facial cues, such as facial action units and gaze direction. Finally, I'd like to say that I've had a great experience in the Talaria program this summer. Coming into this project, I had zero experience with research and machine learning. So I'd like to thank my mentor, Susan, whose steady assistance, patience, and willingness to let me experiment were indispensable to the conception and the completion of my project. And I'd also like to thank the Talaria team, my Talaria pod members, and my fellow mentees. I don't know what emotions you're feeling right now, and I don't know if you're distracted or not, but for your solidarity during our research journeys and for listening today, thank you.